All right, welcome everybody back to another episode of the Big Doug and Carmi Show. Your one-stop shop for all things Commanders. Yes, I know the intro is old. We are working on it. I promise we'll get it there. Our guest today is BrettKollmann. Brett, how are you?
I'm good. Still recovering from the draft, but I will say something I found intriguing in the couple weeks since the draft. Am I the only person who liked the Commanders draft? Like I actually liked a lot of what they did, and I was looking at grades and everything like that, and I see him get dogged a lot. I'm like, I don't know, I kind of liked it a lot. Maybe I'm on an island. I don't know.
No, I don't know. I saw a lot of good responses. I guess it all depends on where you sit with Standout as the extra pick in the second, and of course it all starts with Jaden Daniels, which we'll get to. But it was funny. There was a lot more intrigue leading up to that pick, and I guess was necessary because it sounds like it's been there for a long time. Brett, I was thinking about this the other day. I don't know why. I guess because my brain is weird, but I was thinking when the aliens finally get here and they ask you to describe football, how would you describe the game to them, and whose tape would you turn on first?
I would describe it as 11 men working together to make 11 other men do something against their will. And as far as the tape that I would turn on, probably like early 2010 Stanford, when they would just throw like 9 offensive tackles on the field and run power just because they could, like the old David Shaw teams where Andrew Luck would throw like 18 times a game, but it didn't matter. Those teams, I think, were like peak football to me.
You do that over USC with Reggie Bush and Matt Leinart?
I just think I think the Stanford teams were a little bit more pure to me.
Gotcha.
Right?
Okay.
A little bit less flash and a little bit more just anger and violence, which I tend to like.
The crux of football, I understand. Makes sense.
Is that what we'll see with the Chargers this year?
Oh yeah. Like, and again, Harbaugh was already in San Francisco at that time, so maybe I would throw on the early 2010s Niners because that was just an even more ridiculous version of the early 2010 Stanford team that Harbaugh had previously coached. It was a program that he built that Shaw then built upon it on top of that. But if you're looking back at that early 2010s Niners team, the spine of that team on both sides of the ball was ridiculous. Whether you're looking at the offensive line, the defensive front, the running back room with Frank Gore, the safeties, that formula of building the spine of a team has never not worked, in my opinion. That's what Jim's trying to do with the Chargers now. And to be honest, if you're looking at what the Commanders did this year, it kind of looks like that too, right? So they did it with a couple different pieces, but you can kind of see that they're trying to build the middle first and the edges after, because the team, as talented as they were on the outside in previous regimes, whether you're looking at the receiver position or literally the edge rusher position, the spine of the team wasn't sound, and it kind of feels like they're trying to build that up now.
It's interesting you mentioned that. We've had several people on the podcast recently discuss with us how quickly quarterbacks get the ball out of their hands, which is making the edge rusher less important. But I think we are starting to focus more on that interior pressure because you can get to the quarterback so much faster just right up the middle. And that's definitely what the Commanders did this year. The center play was not great last year. Neither were the guards. The right guard, Cosme, I think, could play. But they definitely worked on beefing up the interior of that offensive line this year.
Yeah, and it's so funny how edge rushers matter a lot once you get DBs that can cover.
That's right.
Because if you get DBs that can cover, all of a sudden you got 2.5 seconds, and then the edge rushers have time. You look at what happened in Cleveland. They had arguably the best secondary in football. They played cover one all day long, and Miles had time to get home. The whole pass rush had time to get home, and all of a sudden they're putting up ridiculous numbers. It's like, yeah, because they're getting help on the back end. So I I think if you really want to unlock what the Panthers what the Commanders pass rush could be, honestly, I look at the secondary. Like, you got to build the secondary, and hopefully Emmanuel Forbes becomes what they think Emmanuel Forbes can be. But even the interior guys, and their interior rotation is absolutely absurd. Even they will get more productive once you look at this secondary that can actually play man coverage and hold up, which I don't think they've been able to do for a while, right? But once they get that right, everything else is going to look a lot better.
It's incredible to think that the John Allen and Deron Payne, 80% of the snaps last year. How they made it a full season, I still have no idea. Brett, over 400,000 subs on YouTube. The newest video you put out was on a reflection of your YouTube career, I guess is the best way to go. Found it very insightful. I'm curious, with the layoffs at ESPN and and NFL Network, is that a reflection of where we're headed as far as where people are getting their content, how people are consuming it? People don't need a network necessarily with the ability to have their own platform and monetize it. Where do you see this thing headed?
I think there's a fundamental shift in the industry coming. And it's bittersweet in a way, because like I know a lot of the people that have lost. I mean, I started in TV, right? So I still know a lot of the people that unfortunately have been affected by these layoffs, and it's terrific and it's terrible, right? But it also feels so unavoidable just because of what's happened to the cable TV landscape in the last not 5, not 10, but 15 to 20 years. Like, it's gone down every year for as long as I can remember. Even when I was in TV over a decade ago, like we felt that every year, right? And so I just feel like the whole cable TV industry has just been slowly falling off a cliff. And but it doesn't mean that people are consuming less media. It just means they're consuming media differently. And they're consuming media now on YouTube. They're consuming it on TikTok, on Instagram, on Facebook. And unfortunately, there are some platforms in cable TV that just haven't been able to pivot as quickly, right? And that goes for ESPN as well, right? Now, that's the bitter part of it. The sweet part of it is that, people like you and me that are creators, we are getting an uptick in eyeballs from people that traditionally would have been watching cable TV if cable TV was the only thing that was available to them. Now there's options, and so the eyeballs are spread across a much wider plane, and we happen to be catching more of those these days. So it's not that less media is being consumed. In fact, more media is being consumed. It's just being consumed at different places, and it's going away from cable TV and it's going towards, all these different content platforms and streaming services and stuff like that. And so I don't want to equate it to a gold rush, but I do think it's a big opportunity for creators in all niches, and especially all sub niches within sports, whether it's covering a specific team, covering an entire league. There's a big opportunity to now build your own audience that I don't think that opportunity existed even 10 years ago. So again, my heart aches for a lot of people that are in traditional media that have lost their jobs over the last several years. Again, I know a lot of them. But I also don't know what could have been done to avoid this, just because I don't think it's their fault. I just think it's overall media trends that have led to this. And it almost feels just like hopelessly unavoidable for that side of the media sphere. And again, my heart goes out to them. I really don't know how this could have been avoided.
Gotcha. Brett, one of the big parts of this whole media push is, scouting online, right? And studying film, studying tape. That's definitely a big market that everyone's kind of moving towards right now. If you were to give advice to anybody that's up and coming at scouting film online, what is one thing people continuously get wrong, in your opinion, when they're studying film, and how could they avoid it potentially?
Making assumptions about what a coach has asked a player to do. And this is something that, again, I've had to learn the hard way a lot, right? I look back at my evaluations of quarterbacks, from like 2014 out to 2020 or so, which is where it finally started to really hammer home for me. Just because a quarterback doesn't do something on tape in college doesn't mean that they can't. In fact, what it probably means is that's what they were coached to do.
Mm-hmm.
I look at Justin Herbert at Oregon. Just because he was throwing bubble screens at an absolutely ridiculous rate, it was like 25% of their offense. Just because he was throwing bubble screens doesn't mean that he can't stretch the field and make tight window throws and do all the stuff that we know Justin Herbert can do. It just means that Mario Cristobal completely screwed all of us out of what Justin Herbert could have been at Oregon by having a really, really lackluster system, right? So I definitely learned that just because we don't see it doesn't mean it doesn't exist. And I tried to apply that lesson to Jaden Daniels this year.
I was going to ask.
Most of their offense was fades and hitches. And we didn't really get to see him work the middle of the field that much. And there were a couple times where I was like, pull the trigger, Jaden. Like, it's there. And he kind of avoided it. Does that mean that he can't work the middle of the field? No. Does that mean that he can't be a full field reader? No. It just means that the structure of the offense was, hey, we got Malik Neighbors running a slot fade to the field. There's tons of space. Throw the slot fade, score a touchdown. We're trying to win ball games here. Like, that's what that means. It doesn't mean he can't do it. It just means that, yeah, that's what he was asked to do. So am I predicting that he's going to come out here and be CJ Stroud and work the middle of the field better than most quarterbacks in the NFL as a rookie? No. But I also wouldn't be surprised if we see a very different Jaden Daniels as a rookie, because he's going to be asked to do different stuff. And unfortunately, the harsh reality of draft analysis, both pre-draft and post-draft, is we don't know.
Yeah.
Like, we really don't know until we see it. We have no clue what's going to happen.
If they would alter the game so that they were the same between the college and the NFL, how much easier would it make for not just evaluations, but for the guys going from college to the pros? Because the games are not, they are the same game. They are not similar. And they are asked to do different things. And the coaches in college are getting paid to win in college, to your point, which is why a lot of these guys aren't getting used the way that they will be. What keeps us from changing the rules to making them the same? And would we be better off that way?
I think so. If honestly, the one rule that would have to be changed, it's not even really a rule. It's more of a field regulation.
The hashes.
The hashes. If they change the hashes in college to match the hashes in the pros, it would significantly change the sport. It would, like, I can't even put into words how much college football would change if they were playing on NFL hashes and not college hashes. The space and the timing, like, it's just fundamentally a different game, right? Not to mention, having linemen being able to go 3 yards down the field instead of 1 yard down the field. Like, it's just not the same sport.
It's not.
And that's what makes it so hard to judge these quarterbacks, is they're not playing the same sport. If those two things changed, in terms of the ineligible downfield receiver rule and the hash marks, we'd have a much better idea of who could actually play in the NFL. However, the reason why I don't think they're going to do that is because, A, those hash marks are reflective of the high school game, and B, they kind of need the spacing to be that way so that teams with a lesser amount of talent have a way to compete.
Gotcha.
Because then it's about the coaching staff being able to manipulate space more so than just leaning on talent. When the hashes are closer together, it's really more about who's got the talent. When the hashes are far apart, you can kind of scheme your way into some stuff. So I don't think they're ever going to change it for that reason. But if they did, I'll tell you what, quarterback evals would change overnight, and we'd really find out who can actually play.
Interesting. So speaking of the draft, speaking of translatable skills, I'd love to hear your thoughts on the draft. Like, what two teams, in your opinion, improved themselves the most? That you can consider draft class, you can consider free agency as well. But if you were considering two teams, who really improved themselves over the offseason?
I really love what the Chargers did.
Mm-hmm.
The Joe Alt pick I thought was great. Chargers fans were a little upset on Thursday because, like, oh my God, Malik Neighbors. Malik Neighbors was never going to be a Charger.
Yeah.
And from my understanding, there was only one team that was going to take him that high, and the team that took him that high was the one that took him.
Oh, really?
And again, I'm not saying Malik Neighbors isn't going to be a good pro. I think he is, but the NFL's feelings on Malik Neighbors was very different than I think what the media's feelings on Malik Neighbors.
Interesting. Okay.
And you know,
real quick before you finish your, sorry, Brett, how do we get so far apart between what the NFL thinks and what media thinks? Because there were some this year, like I think everybody thought for Washington, let's say it was going to be a Drake May and Jaden Daniels race. John Cotton tells us afterwards that it wasn't. It was always going to be McCarthy. But yet we spent months arguing the wrong two. How do we end up so different between the two factions?
Well, because each team has their own parameters, right, that they're evaluating by. And each team has their own priorities. Each team has their own skill sets they're looking for. Each team has their own tolerance for, you know, particular, what's the word? Personalities, right?
Yeah, okay.
Or medical, right? Like every team has different boards for that reason, because they see medical things differently. They see personality things differently. Like the Colts had a different personality evaluation on A.D. Mitchell than the rest of the league, right? Because I think they had kind of a better understanding of who he was as a person, which again, you could argue a lot of that was because of, like, you know, the type 1 diabetes stuff, which we found out from Bob McGinn's article. And also if you're looking at like type 1 diabetes and the effects that it has on mood in the morning, well, guess when all of his combine interviews were in the morning. Yeah. So like, again, it's
context.
Every team has different context on these guys. And that's why I think there are some teams that absolutely would not have taken Malik Neighbors in the top 10. There are some teams that would have taken Malik Neighbors over Marvin, because everybody has different context for these guys and different tolerances and different skill sets they're trying to prioritize. So, and I think the same goes to the Commanders. Like if you're looking at what they want to do, like, yeah, Jaden Daniels makes sense. Did I have Drake May as my second quarterback in this class? Yes. Does that mean that Jaden wasn't a better fit for what the Commanders need right now? No. Like kind of makes sense to me. But I think the hard part about draft evals and looking at where teams are versus where the media is the media is trying to look at it from their own perspective rather than from the individual team's perspective. And those are two fundamentally different things.
You were telling us about the Chargers.
Oh, right. I love the Joe Alt pick. I think that tackle tandem in LA is going to be absolutely disgusting.
So Alt goes to the right side and they leave Slater at the left side?
I think that's what they're going to do. It's what makes the most sense to me, which means their entire offensive line is set and they're probably going to have a competition for right guard, but like they're totally good in the offensive line. And then to come back and get Lab McConkey on day 2 to just be like the one separator, right? I love the Junior Colson pick. He's going to wear the green dot from day 1 because he already knows the defense because he played for Minter. The Kamani Vidal pick, the Troy running back in the 6th round. I loved that pick. Again, this is a team that built the spine. They're trying to win the Harbaugh way. I would also say, if we're taking the Commanders out of it, I loved what the Bills did. Like they had kind of like a volume approach. They traded down a couple times, but the Keon Coleman pick I was a big fan of. They took Ulufosio, the linebacker out of Washington, who was actually my 3rd rated linebacker in this class. I think they got him in the 5th round. So they got a bunch of good value picks, a bunch of guys that are going to get snaps for them. Freaking Packers, man.
Interesting. People have the Steelers. I'm surprised you haven't said that one yet, but you're saying Packers, but go ahead.
Steelers almost feels obvious because it's like, dude, they took really good offensive linemen. They're going to be able to run the hell out of the ball.
Absolutely.
The Packers, I think, was sneaky because a lot of Packers fans didn't even like their drafts. And I was looking at it and I was like, he's a good player. He's a good player. He's a good player. Like Marshawn Lloyd is going to be their new Aaron Jones.
Yeah.
100%. And Josh Jacobs is going to be their new A.J. Dillon. And then A.J. Dillon is going to be somewhere else. But like I loved what they've built with the Packers there, which pains me to say, but God, they're going to be so hard to beat.
Where were you on Jordan Love? Did that come out of nowhere? Did you see that coming?
A little bit of both. Like when Jordan Love was coming out, I didn't have a 1st round grade on him because it's interesting how, you know, as physically talented as he was, and he was very talented. I saw him at the Senior Bowl that year. Ball just cut through the wind on a really kind of stormy, cold terrible Tuesday in Mobile, Alabama in January. Like, it was terrible weather, and it was him and Herbert throwing, and their ball just looks different, right? And then you had poor Anthony Gordon from Wazoo out there right after. It's like throwing off an aircraft carrier, right? So I was like, okay, yeah, he can spin it. But he also threw like the worst fade that I had ever seen, like a highly touted prospect throw. Like, he just could not hit on those. And I was like, I don't know. He needs time. Like, because if you can't hit a fade, especially for the Packers, where like half their offense at the time was built off fades to Devontae Adams, like, you got to be able to throw that ball. So I was like, I don't know. It's going to take him a little bit. Luckily, he went to a place where he could sit for a little bit, sat for multiple years. And the first 10 weeks of the season, it wasn't good. Like, I think even Jordan would tell you that it wasn't good. Like, it was starting to look like the experiment was going to be a failure. And then he just turned it on. And I don't know yet what clicked. I got to go back and watch the film. I don't know what clicked, but something clicked. And it kind of crescendoed with that playoff game against Dallas, where he was spectacular. Like, that looked like Aaron Rodgers out there. And you're like, oh my God, they got another one, right? And to be honest, they could have beat the 49ers too. Like, he got a little bit too much dip on his chip. It was like a 1st and 10. It's like, Jordan, you don't got to throw that there. And again, he's a young guy. He learned lessons. But like, they could have beat the 49ers. And if they beat the 49ers, they might have gone all the way. Like, there was nobody hotter in the league than the Packers at that point. So yes, I was right about Jordan Love in the sense that I didn't think he should have been drafted in the first round. And I think he got a little bit overdrafted at the time, but he happened to go to a situation where he didn't have to play so that he could eventually become a quarterback that actually was worth a first round pick, right? So if he had to go somewhere where he had to play, he might have gotten Trey Lance. But because he went to Green Bay, it worked out. So I think situation is everything for a young quarterback. You got to go to the right place, which is why Drake May with the Commanders might not have worked. Jaden Daniels with the Commanders might work, whereas Drake May in New England might work better because he doesn't have to play right now. Like, does that make sense? Like, I think situation really determines everything for these guys.
Hey, Brett, I love hearing from people that are on the scene, that are on the spot. You talked about Justin Herbert throwing an awesome ball, just kind of popped out with you. Jordan Love, the same thing. Was there another player maybe during this whole process, during the Senior Bowl, during the draft combine, where it's like, that's a BrettKollmann guy. You loved watching him. You see a lot of potential in him. Like, give me 2 or 3 guys that you're looking for this year to be successful in the pros.
I would say Malik Washington, who was like a 5th or 6th round pick out of Miami.
People love him.
He's such an easy guy to evaluate. Great route runner, catches everything. And so I was down on the sidelines at the combine, like shooting footage during all the receiver drills. And there was a corner route that they threw to Malik. And he went up and he extended and he plucked it. And I swear to God, okay, when he landed, there was no sound. Like, absolute, like, whisper quiet feet. I'm like, he's 190 pounds that jumped 40 inches in the air. And when he landed, you didn't hear anything. He's just, I love him as an athlete. And I know he went late because he's small, but he's good. Like, he's a really, really good receiver. Rome Odunze, I think, is just like one of the easiest guys in this class. Like, you know, he's going to be good. Xavier Legette, who was a big fan of. Junior Colson, I mentioned for the Chargers. I had him as LB1 for me. I'm trying to think. You know, Johnny Newton, if the foot checks out, which I think is probably the reason why he fell as late as he did. The foot checks out, like, that dude's a monster. And as soon as he got picked, you know, my first thought was, they already got Allen in Payne. What's Allen's contract? And then I immediately
right.
You know, I was like,
work your way backwards.
Allen's only going to be here for another year. You know, so that immediately made sense. But I was like, oh, they just got another John Allen. That's cool. So I would say all those guys are just ones that were super easy evaluations that I just know they're going to be good.
Got it.
You go to all the events, East West Shrine Bowl, the Senior Bowl, Combine, Draft. Do you have a favorite?
Combine, for sure. Combine's the best NFL event I've ever been to.
Okay.
And it was my first one. This last year was my first one. But boy, I didn't realize what I've been missing for the last 10 years. Like, Combine is awesome. not just like the drills themselves and being on the field. Like that was cool. You know, like I was standing right there when Xavier Worthy ran the 4.21, and I almost gave myself whiplash just from how fast I had to turn my head. That was super cool and a once in a lifetime experience. But also just like the networking at the combine is crazy. Like everybody's there. The whole league is there, even more than the Super Bowl. It's like a convention for football that also happens to have drills going on the side. I loved it. It was awesome.
Sounds great.
Let's get into the Commanders.
Yeah, let's do it. So yeah, let's kind of go through them step by step. Brett, how do you feel about that? You kind of hinted at Jaden Daniels being a potential good fit. We'll start off with him. That's a big topic. Then we'll go through the rest of the draft picks. Were you a Jaden Daniels fan? Do you feel like he's going to fit pretty well with Cliff Kingsbury? What are your thoughts on that?
I liked him a lot. Again, there were some concerns that I had on tape. I'm not going to pretend like he was a perfect prospect. I did wish that he worked the middle of the field when opportunities presented themselves. But also I understand that LSU might have told him, protect the ball because we're always just one slot fade away from scoring. So if you don't absolutely love it, don't throw it. He's going to have to do that in the NFL because, again, like we said, the hashes are different. You got to work the middle in the NFL. So that was one thing I wish he did more. I wish he had literally any self-preservation instinct whatsoever.
Are you worried about his size? How do you feel about that?
The size I'm not worried about.
Okay.
The running into 300-pound human beings that want to do him
decision making. Okay.
That's what I'm worried about, right?
Okay.
And I do think there were some times where I thought he could have hung later in the pocket and he kind of did like a 1-2 run. You can't really do that in the NFL. Like you kind of got to stay in the pocket as long as you can. Because some guys have made it work. Early career Lamar made it work. Early career Cam made it work. I think he's a good runner. I don't think he's those guys as a runner. So like he's got to hang in there for his own health and safety. He's going to take bigger hits outside the pocket than he is inside the pocket.
That's right.
So that was
they tried to convince Robert that, and he wouldn't believe him.
Exactly.
There's bigger outside the pocket than in it. He refused to listen.
So that's kind of my big thing with him. As far as landing spot, again, for what Cliff is going to ask him to do from a throwing perspective, he's got all that. Like Cliff is going to say, like, yeah, we're going to work outside the numbers. We're going to throw fades because you throw a great fade. And we've got guys on the outside that can go up and win those 50-50s. Or really, when it comes to Terry, it's more like 60-40. So, like, yeah, they're going to abuse the crap out of that. They're going to be a very vertical offense. I'm very curious to see how or if they use him in the design quarterback run game, knowing that he doesn't know how to slide. I'm also curious to see how much they work the middle of the field, but we won't really have those answers until October. I like him a lot as a prospect. He's a great downfield thrower. He's a great kid. He's very coachable. Like, I think the upside is very high, but there are, again, some things that I had concerns about that we'll have to see.
Wait and see.
Now, I'm assuming you had Caleb as QB1.
I did.
I didn't actually ask you, so and not everybody had him one, most, but not all. We hear a ton about the corner from Michigan, and some people had him as their favorite prospect overall. What do you think he looks like in a Dan Quinn defense?
I think he's going to be, if we're talking about Mike Sanders still, I think he's going to be like a really, really high-end nickel in the NFL, right? Because he's got great hips, great feet, really, really fluid mover, phenomenal ball skills, which I mean he's converted receiver, so that makes sense. He's tough as hell, really smart. Again, he's only been playing DB for like 2 years, and he's already this good. He's aggressive. He tackles well. Like, I think I could see him being a demon on special teams on both sides, both on return and on cover. He's just a football player. Like, again, guys that switch positions and end up being this good immediately are just good football players. And his nickname at the Michigan program was the CEO. So that kind of tells you what type he is in the locker room too. So
love it.
I love that Sanders still pick. I'll tell you what, this is going to sound weird. My favorite pick they made, the 5th round pick, even over Johnny Newton, over Jaden Daniels, over Sanders still, over Sinnott. If we're just talking about value, Jordan McGee, man, that Temple linebacker.
That's starting to bubble up a little bit.
I tell you, if he learned how to tackle, that's Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. Like, that's the one thing. He's just got to tackle better. But if he does, if we're talking about fluidity, explosiveness, playmaking ability, instincts, all that kind of stuff, he's got all that. He just has to get guys on the ground a little bit more. But, like, that's the reason he went in the 5th round. If he could tackle better, he's a 2nd-round pick all day long. I love Jordan McGee.
Is he more of an uphill?
Comp him to the guy. Did you just comp him to the guy from Notre Dame?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, JOK from, like, what, 3 years ago, I think, is when he was coming out.
That's great. So, Brett, that's more of a coverage linebacker as opposed to uphill linebacker, right? That we're trying to get at?
I would say, yeah, he's more of like your typical Will. I think he's honestly going to push Jamin Davis for that job. Like, I really think he is. And Jamin, like, I like Jamin when he was coming out. He hasn't really turned into what I thought he could be, which is unfortunate because they put a high pick into him. But, like, McGee is just as naturally talented. It's just the tackle. He just tackles too high. But, I mean, God, you fix that. You're good to go. Like, I really think he could push for snaps there. And then at middle or at Mike, you're obviously going to have Bobby Wagner, and at Sam, you're going to have Luvu. So that's kind of the only linebacker job that I think there will be a competition for, but he will make it a competition.
It's incredible how little they put into the linebacker position while Ron and Jack were here, which is odd because they're linebackers. And in one season, like, there's a log jam in linebacker all of a sudden. It's kind of refreshing. On one of your most recent videos, Brett, you had some of your favorite picks from each team, and I think for Washington you put Sinnott. We've heard him comp here to a former Redskin, Chris Cooley. You comped him sort of to Mike Allstott, which I thought was interesting
because he's just physical with the ball in his hands. Like, how many highlights when you watch Ben Sinnott is just him with the football carrying a washing machine on his back. Just like, it didn't matter what's like, he's just like, he's throwing refrigerators everywhere. Like, I love how he plays the game. I think he's a better blocker than Cooley was, honestly. Like, Cooley was basically just a receiver. I think Sinnott is a little bit of both. He's Mike Allstott with the ball in his hands, but as a blocker, he's got a lot of like Kyle Juszczyk to him. You want to use him as a fullback. You want to use him like on the move, out in space. He's great at that. You can give him some snaps at Y as well. He's another one of these guys where he's just a good football player. Probably going to be a hell of a pick for special teams too, considering the new kickoff rules, because you need guys. I mean, essentially it turns kickoffs into run plays, right? So you need guys that are built like Sinnott, that are 240 and explosive and athletic, that can block in space. But I could also see them doing some real wacky, crazy stuff where he's getting like reverses on kickoffs, right? Because you can do that.
A new rule. Yeah.
If you look at how the XFL did it with the same rules, like that was a thing that people did. Like they did reverses on kickoffs. And like, so if you're going to have him be a point of attack blocker on kickoff and then like put his foot in the ground and reverse field and you give him the ball, who's going to tackle him in space? Like, good luck. So like, I'm telling you, they're going to do that this year. They're going to do it. It's going to go for
I love it. It's going to be fun. So it seemed like Washington got a lot of early acclaim with their picks. Jaden Daniel, Johnny Newton, Mike Sanders still. Going down a little bit further down the list, BrettKollmann and Luke McCaffrey, people kind of raised their eyebrows a little bit on those two picks. I'm curious of your thoughts because we hear about things locally here in the media. I didn't know what your thoughts were with NFL circles as well. BrettKollmann, there's talk about him being a guard or a tackle. Luke McCaffrey, we're interested. We love the work ethic. We love the bloodlines. But Troy Franklin was on the board. Malik Washington was on the board. We're kind of curious if we should have gone that direction with him. What are your thoughts on either prospect? Or, pick anyone and just jump on it if you don't mind.
McCaffrey's the type of receiver where you just throw the ball into the gates of hell and he says, I got it, coach. Like, that's the kind of receiver he is. He's going to catch 3 balls a game, but they're all going to be important.
Okay.
So that's what you're drafting him for. It's just 3 first downs a game that he's going to get you. But they're going to turn the tide of the game. And then Coleman I'm actually fascinated by.
Okay.
Because I don't know what he's going to be. Right, he played left tackle in 2022, and then he played guard, and he played hurt while he was at guard. So I know some Commanders fans have said, like, hey, he is explicitly going to be left tackle because we're going off of what he was in 2022, and I totally understand that. But also, he's one of these guys where it's like I could see him playing tackle, but he might be better at guard, kind of like how Cosmi was, right, where they tried him at tackle, and then he eventually went to guard. But Cosmi also played left tackle in college, so maybe they think that that right tackle wasn't good for him, but left tackle, if he went back and played a college position, left side, I don't know what they're going to do, truly, because you got how many guys that can play both on either side at this point. So what might end up happening is, okay, Cosmi's proven himself to be a good guard. Let's leave him there so that we don't screw him up anymore like we tried to do early in his career when we were moving him around, right? So maybe let's just leave Cosmi there, and then Coleman, throughout the summer, we try it both and we see where his best spot is, and then we try to build our best five around that. Because at worst, if we have a really good guard tandem, we can build around that, rather than having five guys that are okay at spots we're trying to force them into. Let's get two guys that are really good at their spots and then figure out the rest. That might be what they end up doing. But again, it's all about getting your best five on the field. I don't think they even know what their best five is going to be until like week 2, week 3 camp.
I agree.
Yeah, right now it's Wiley at right tackle and Cornelius Lucas, I guess, at left tackle. Got it page before opening day, I would assume.
I wouldn't, again, we talked about the John Allen contract. I would not rule them out using that as a chip to get a tackle from somebody.
Right. Gotcha.
I wouldn't rule it out. Like, I think they took Newton for that purpose, to give them flexibility. I'm not saying they will, but it might be their only way. Like, let's just say Coleman is a guard and they figure that out pretty quick.
Yeah.
They're going to have to do something to get a tackle. That might be the only option they got.
Ship him off to the Chargers for Slater, and then he just moved.
Oh, yeah.
Fair deal. I'm ready.
That's fair, yeah.
Brett, the over, we've been wrapping these up this way. The over-under for the Commanders is 6.5 this year. You like the over or under on that one?
Ooh. That's tough, because I think the Eagles are going to bounce back this year. The Giants, the Cowboys, I think, I don't see it with the Cowboys this year. So I think they're going to pick up an extra 1 or 2 games in the division. Because if I'm just looking at best rosters in the division at this point, it's hard for me to think that they're not going to pick up 1 or 2 games in the division. You said 6.5?
Mm-hmm.
6.5.
Boy, that's a good line.
Don't worry, if you say under, we'll still let you back.
Yeah, we're not going to.
That's the thing is, I don't think it's going to be under.
Yeah.
But it's is it going to be 6 wins and a tie, or is it going to be 7 or 8 wins? I probably lean over, because I think it's more likely that they hit 8 wins than they hit 6. But it's close. But here's the thing: I don't think Commanders fans should be worried about 2024. I think 2025 is what matters. I think that's what they're building for here. 2025 is showtime for me. And I kind of look at it similarly to where the Texans were at last year. Now, the Texans ended up getting there a year early, but I have the same outlook on the Commanders this time that I had on the Texans this time last year, where at the time I was like, 2023 Texans, they're going to show some nice things. 2024 is what matters. 2024 is what matters for the Texans, but they ended up being really darn good last year. So I kind of see the same thing for the Commanders, where this is the get your feet wet year with the young guys, get them acclimated, get them situated, see what you like on the offensive and defensive lines, get your systems in place with the new coaching staff. And then 2025, you come back with a vengeance with a good draft. You hopefully, ideally solidify your last offensive line piece that you need. You deal with the John Allen contract, you do some moves in free agency, and then you get after it. You get after the NFC East in 2025. That's what I think happens here. So if they get to 7 or 8, I think Commanders fans would take that, because it's just showing improvement. But this isn't the year that if I was rooting for this franchise, this is the year that I want to have fun, but I don't have expectations.
See growth.
Yeah.
Can I throw one more in there, Doug, before we wrap it up, if you don't mind?
Yeah.
Is that okay? So, Brett, last one for you. I'm sorry about the time. From a national perspective, is there one glaring hole that you still see on the Washington's roster, like a position group that you're kind of worried about, or you think hey, hopefully in 2025 that can be resolved? Is it offensive line? Is it the receiving group? Is it,
it's literally just getting an answer at left tackle. That's okay. Really it. That's really it. And if Coleman's the answer, great. That's awesome. But that's the one thing I look at where, we got to deal with Micah Parsons. We got to deal with Brian Burns. We better have answers, right?
Yeah.
So if they don't have an answer for left tackle this year, let's say Coleman is a guard and then Cornelius Lucas is your left tackle and Wiley's your right tackle. If they don't have answers for tackle this year, things it could hurt a lot. So they got to figure that out for 2025. But that's my point, is that's kind of it, right? Yeah. That's kind of it. And if they get that fixed by 2025, you got a young Jaden Daniels. He's cheap. You got money to work with. You've had a couple good drafts. Like that's the opportunity, is you're only one position group away. I'm not saying it's an easy position group to fix, but once they fix it, what else is there? Like I look at that roster from top to bottom, like it's good. It's legitimately good. They just got to make sure tackle's okay.
BrettKollmann is a random YouTuber. You can find him all over the place. Bootleg Football Show in the film room. Brett, you're the best, buddy. We appreciate you.
Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Brett.